I will now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. Agus Arish, Osher the Hella Shrianta Amma Epinol, Armagad.
Dermaigad Yaskin Corlia. Agus a Haniste, Doherty gold smack Kalchik and Realta sitting here, Kim Costas Moralta. Chimage goal made it a fia Arfingate Tacker, Billy Lectra has Medus can quick Fingate or Billy Gas, Agus ta Costa all the CHOT, so as Begna Dubulch. Labianian West, agus ta Kisna Amias West Doyeg Fingate, agus ta Brew Vilchina, a Hanisher, or highly and commercial, agus our van income. There's no doubt that the cost of living crisis is reducing the living standards of low and middle income households right across the state. Inflation in the last 12 months to April has been reached now over 7%, and that's the biggest spike we've seen in prices in over 2 decades. And workers and families out there, Taoiseach, are really struggling. They're seeing their energy bills soar and they're seeing other costs rise. And we know what has caused this. Many factors are beyond our control, but others are not. Soaring rents, unaffordable childcare are not beyond the control of this government. In many ways, they have reached such unaffordable levels because of government policy, and government can and must respond. We in Sinn Féin fully recognise that every household can't be protected from every single price increase, but low and middle income households must be supported. And in this regard, the government has lost control of the cost of living crisis. Electricity bills have increased by 28%, gas bills by over 50%, the cost of home heating oil has almost doubled, and rents have gone up by 12%. And of course, inflation impacts everybody, but not everybody equally. Lower and middle income households are hit hardest, spending as they do a higher proportion of their money on energy and food. So Taoiseach, the most vulnerable in our society are faced with choices that they should never have to make over whether to eat or to heat their homes. And shamefully, this government have not increased social welfare rates in response to historic levels of inflation. And while we see also the pay packets of low-paid workers, it cannot stretch from one month to the next. So let's be clear, you're deliberately allowing people to fall through the cracks. Sinn Féin have been consistent for many months, calling for a mini-budget that would bring forward a comprehensive package of measures to support low and middle-income households. This morning, the think tank for Action on Social Change released their report on inequality in Ireland in 2022. In the report, they highlight the fact that inflation has impacted low-income households most and has been made worse by government policies failure in areas such as housing and in childcare. Their recommendations, Taoiseach, echo what we in Sinn Féin have been calling for months, for an increase in social welfare rates to ensure that the most vulnerable in our society are protected and are supported. They've also called for an increase in the minimum wage to boost the incomes of more than 130,000 workers, but the government has refused to do both of these things. We in Sinn Féin have been calling on your government to introduce targeted measures to protect renters through a refundable tax credit, putting 1 month's rent back into renters' pockets, and to ban rent increases. We've been calling on you to reduce the cost of childcare and to reduce the cost of home heating oil. And Taoiseach, these measures can be taken, they are sensible, they're necessary, they are what families and workers need at this time. But government continues to delay, continues to oppose, continues to rule them out. But Taoiseach, let me tell you this, workers and families cannot afford any more delay or inaction. They are looking for government to respond to an unprecedented challenge in their homes and their lifestyles and their cost of living crisis that they are facing right here, right now. They're looking for government to take the actions that we in Sinn Féin have spelled out. So can I ask you, Taoiseach, are government planning to introduce any further measures, or do you continue to ignore the plight, particularly those on fixed incomes who have not seen an increase in social welfare rates during this unprecedented price increases?
Thanks very much, Deputy, for raising this important issue. And at the outset, I want to acknowledge that we are facing a cost of living crisis, that inflation is at levels that we haven't seen for a very long time, and that people are feeling the pinch, and it's more than a pinch. A lot of people are struggling to make ends meet. It's affecting households, it's affecting families, it's also affecting businesses in terms of the cost of energy. People see it when they fill their car with petrol or diesel, really see it when you see your electricity or gas bill, and increasingly are starting to see it in other areas such as the cost of groceries as well. And it is true that those affected the most are those in the lowest incomes. because they spend more of their incomes on food and energy than people on middle and higher incomes too. But I don't think it's the case that it's only affecting people on low to middle incomes. People on average incomes, 40, 50,000 a year, working full time, are being affected too. And that's why the government's approach to this has been to take action that is universal, so that everyone gets some help, including people on middle incomes and good incomes, but that we are targeting our approach, and that most of the support that we give people is going to those on the lowest incomes. And I think that's the right approach. I know Sinn Féin doesn't support it for ideological reasons. I disagree with you on that. A universal approach to help everyone, recognising that middle income families are being hit too, but a targeted approach giving additional help to those in the lowest incomes. And I think that's the right approach, even if you don't support it. I'm a little bit disappointed in your question, because there was no acknowledgement in it at all that the government had done anything to help people with the cost of living. And I think that's not fair. We've had packages totaling 2.4 billion euros to help people with the cost of living. And that is considerable, and is more than would be the case in any one budget. So we had a tax and welfare package that kicked in January. You may have supported the welfare and pension increases, but you did not support the tax element of that. And it is the case that for the average couple, both earning 40,000 a year, we'll say, they would be thousands of euros worse off under Sinn Féin in terms of after-tax income than they are under the current government, and that's a fact. We had the increase in the minimum wage, which kicked in January. We reduced VAT on electricity and gas. We reduced excise on petrol and diesel. We brought in targeted measures to help those who need it the most, and that was the increase in the fuel allowance, 2 payments in addition on the fuel allowance. There's a €200 discount per household coming off electricity bills, and people are seeing that in their bills at the moment. There's a 2% cap on rent increases, which means that rent increases are now going up between 0 and 2% for existing tenancies. We've had reductions in public transport, which I think have been widely welcomed, including especially for younger people. We've had a reduction in the cost of school transport for families that have multiple kids using school transport. We've had a reduction in the cost of medicines, and 92% of childcare services have signed up to free fees. Not a single mention of any of that in your question. And I think that's not fair. 2.4 billion euros, 10 or 20 measures, universal to help everyone, targeted ones to help those most in need. Now, I know what I'm going to hear back. I'm going to hear back the usual rant for social media about how we don't get it and yada yada and all the stuff that's pre-scripted. But I would like to see back, maybe just in part of your response, some acknowledgement that the government has actually done something in this area. 2.4 billion euros worth of relief to help households with the cost of living. Will you at least be generous or honest enough even to acknowledge that in your reply?
Taoiseach, you missed the point. We recognise what happened in the budget. We recognise the measures that were happening. Indeed, we argued strongly. We had to push you again and time again to even move in terms of petrol and diesel, and you still didn't go far enough. But let me tell you this, hand on heart, the people that come into my constituency office, the people that come into the constituency office of my colleagues are not ranting to us when they tell us that they can't make ends meet. When they tell us that they're facing serious choices in this year of 2022 about how to heat their homes, how to clothe their children, how to put food on the table. They are saying to us that they're in social welfare dependent. They haven't seen an increase in social welfare rates as a result of your government, despite the fact that inflation is running at over 7%, and these individuals have a higher rate of inflation. We are hearing people who are renters, who are telling us that they can't afford the rent increases. That even 2% that you're talking about, in many areas it's far more than that. They can't afford that, and they're deemed being homeless. They're not ranting to us, they're telling us the real life experience. And what I'm asking you today in Leader's question is, will government respond to the immediate needs that are there, that households and families are faced, low and middle income, that need additional supports in the form of social welfare increase, in the form of rent rebate, and in the form of reduction in childcare costs?
Deputy, there has been an increase in social welfare rates that occurred in January. and that was done in response to the fact that we had a return to inflation. There hadn't been increases in social welfare rates in some previous budgets. And since then, there has been other increases in social welfare. For example, we brought forward changes to the working family payment. We also brought in an extended fuel allowance period and an additional fuel allowance payment. So we had welfare increases in January, and since then there have been further welfare increases, acknowledging the fact that people living on welfare are being hit hardest by the increase in energy costs and now food costs. So that was done, and I think it would at least be relevant for you to acknowledge that fact. Welfare increases occurred in January, and there have been 2 sets of further welfare increases since then. And then obviously people on welfare have benefited from the €200 per household reduction in electricity bills, which is just kicking in now, the reduction in excise and petrol and diesel. So these things are happening. But as we all acknowledge, a lot of these inflationary pressures are beyond the control of governments, or at least the Irish government, because they're driven by international factors. But there are areas where we can help and can do more, such as childcare, such as the cost of public transport, and we are working on proposals in those areas.